welcome to the France 24 debates. 2 years on, and the first evidence that over 200 Chibok schoolgirls are still alive has apparently been released by Boko Haram. To discuss the implications this evening, I'm delighted to welcome on set Julie Owono, head of the Internet Without Borders Africa Desk. Welcome to you. And from Washington, Jennifer Cook, director of the Africa Programme for the Centre for Strategic International Studies. Thanks to both of you for being with us this evening. And you at home, you can also take part in the debate on Twitter with the hashtag F24Debates. But first, for many families, this was concrete proof that their daughters were still alive. A video released by Boko Haram claims to show the Chibok schoolgirls and demanded the release of their fighters in exchange for setting those girls free. Catherine Clifford brings us this report.
Esther and Kabo Yakubu finally see what they believe is proof their daughter is alive after 2 years of uncertainty.
Since the adopters of those girls, I didn't show my girl in those videos, past videos that has been passed. But when I saw her, I really am very happy. I can be able to sleep today.
Esther says the government's made no effort to save her daughter.
They have not done anything. If they are doing something, they have rescued one. But all the girls that have been rescued, they rescued themselves.
A sentiment shared by the Bring Back Our Girls group, which organises daily protests like this one. Last year, when President Buhari came to power, he promised to make rescuing the girls his priority. While he now says Boko Haram is technically defeated, his government has come no closer to finding over 200 young women still being held. In the video, the group claims government strikes on them have killed some of their captives instead. They're demanding the release of their fighters in return for the girls, and some want the government to cede to this.
Nigerian citizens, stop the nonsense. Let's do this exchange and get our girls back.
The group seems to be turning to its most powerful bargaining chip in the wake of military defeats and a recent split within its ranks. One faction says it's the regional branch of the Islamic State group. The video indicates the other faction, led by Abubakar Shekau, is the one holding the girls. The Nigerian government said it's in contact with those claiming to be behind the video.
So what should we make of this new video? Julie Owono, let me come to you first. So what were your thoughts when you heard that this video had been released?
Well, first, a certain release, like the father of one of these girls, who said that it's at least one proof that they are not dead, that they did not disappear, that they are still alive, and also a bit more hope regarding the efforts made by the Nigerian government, the new Nigerian government, who has promised, as it was stated in the report, who has made of its priority of freeing these girls. We've seen several examples beginning earlier this year of girls who were released, received by the president with state homage and state apparatus, but nevertheless a worrying trend, I would say. This video probably marks a metamorphosis, another metamorphosis of the organization, Boko Haram, which is probably ongoing a transition in its strategy, a transition from violence, total violence, which was advocated and well put in place, unfortunately, by Abubakar Shekau, the alleged old leader of Boko Haram, a transition to a more, how would I say this, a management of the chaos created in eastern northern Nigeria, and probably now, being deported to other zones of the Lake Chad Basin region, which are Cameroon, Chad, and southern Niger. So it's probably the discourse, the speech that was made in this video seems to suggest to victimize these girls against the state, saying that the state, instead of protecting these girls, is actually killing them by its airstrikes, with its harsh military response, because indeed Boko Haram has been, deported further eastern of Maiduguri, its historical, headquarters, further east in Cameroon, in Chad, and in Niger. So this harsh military response did have civilian casualties. We remember earlier airstrikes. The government admitted that it had killed 20 civilians. So I think
they're trying to change the emphasis there, Boko Haram.
Absolutely. They're trying to probably, gather a frustration from the population towards the state.
Okay.
And trying probably to say, the government is saying that it's trying to protect you, but it's not. In reality, they're killing you by the airstrikes and the harsh military response that was adopted against us.
Okay, Jennifer Cook in Washington, is this an assessment that you agree with? This video was an attempt by the group to shift the narrative somewhat?
Well, yeah. First of all, we don't want to draw too much from a pretty narrow evidence base. We don't know when the video was taken. It shows some of the girls, not all of the girls. It says they are getting killed in airstrikes, but we don't know that that's true. I think, one thing that's important in the bigger context of this is Boko Haram is definitely weakened, and it's definitely getting squeezed by Nigerian forces and by regional forces. You see its leadership fracturing. You see thousands of men and members being killed or being captured or surrendering. You've had thousands of girls rescued and returned, even if not this Chibok 200 plus. And so I think, they're on the back foot. And in that, propaganda and videos like this become their biggest weapon. It's no coincidence that at a time that they're extremely weak, they release this video and they're back on the headlines again. They're also, as the previous speaker said, trying to shift the blame for these girls dying onto the government airstrikes. We don't know that the government is actually killing them via airstrikes, but it makes the propaganda point. Right now, very much the battlefield is in these videos and in kind of the war of words among the various factions of Boko Haram. But that shouldn't detract from the fact that they are weakened.
So if the battlefield really is being fought now in the domain of public opinion, we heard in the previous report family members were saying the government should essentially just make this trade, and we heard also that they're being very critical of the Buhari government. Is this something, Jennifer Cook, that you agree with? Is there being more criticism of the government, and are videos like this helping to weaken the government, or should they stand firm?
Rescuing the girls, whether it was in the Jonathan administration or the Buhari administration, was always going to be an extremely challenging task. The theme is bring back our girls of the movement, but you can't just bring back 200 plus girls who are underarmed without getting a lot of them killed. So I think obviously you understand the frustration, the sadness, the anger of parents and other Nigerians to see the girls and the government somewhat helpless in rescuing them. But I don't think we should underestimate how difficult it is to just rescue girls. Hostage situations can last for years. And in this case, we've seen that as well. I think it definitely has some power in shifting the narrative and getting Boko Haram back on the screen again. But I think, if you step back a little bit from the very emotional and understandable emotional response, it's not clear that the Nigerian government should give in to their demands. And it doesn't want to rush a rescue operation that could end up killing more girls than it rescues.
Julia Wono, let me bring you in. Do you feel that the Nigerian government is being successful in their attempts to take on the Boko Haram group?
Well, it is sure that on the military front, as the previous speaker has said rightly, is the Nigerian government, with the help of the multinational task force that was put in place, with I think 8,000 troops on the ground, has has had some quite interesting successes. And as I was saying, it has deported the organization from its stronghold in northern eastern Nigeria, with Maiduguri as its main stronghold, to other countries and other regions where we hadn't had, attacks until very recently. Countries like Cameroon. Very recently, there was the first human bombing in Maroua, one of the main cities of the extreme north of Cameroon. So I think that these military successes are quite, are not full successes, because there is one thing that I think we're underestimating now is the capacity of this group to speak to these populations who nevertheless feel to some extent abandoned by central states. Extreme north of Cameroon is the poorest region of the country, despite the fact that there is indeed a pipeline bringing a Chad-Cameroon pipeline, which brings oil which takes out oil from Chad to the shores of Cameroon, and these regions have been abandoned, and these populations have feel abandoned. And if you imagine that numerous of the troops of Boko Haram are young men sent to Maiduguri to study Quran in Quranic schools, and who are, some of them, recruited and promised up to 300,000 francs salaries per month, which is the equivalent of 500 euros. It's a wealth for most of these families. So how to counter this? It's not only on the military front that you can counter this. It's also on the civil front. Yes. And by having this discourse of saying the state is against you because it's killing your girls, it's fighting us, but it's also killing you and killing your girls, probably. I don't know to what extent this could indeed shift not gather support for this organization, but making even more difficult for populations to collaborate with the central states in order to, give information on the ground on how these groups are, evolving on the territory. So I think we should not underestimate the social and the human aspects and how the capacity of this group to speak to populations who have felt abandoned for the past 20, 30 years by the central states.
Indeed. But let's develop an idea further that I think both Julie and Jennifer, you raised. This video being released at a time when the group is on the back foot, and it's the video has been released as Boko Haram is seemingly being split into two separate factions. Is there a power struggle now taking place at the heart of the Boko Haram group? Jennifer Cook, can you give me your thoughts on this?
Well, yes, I think there is, and part of it maybe goes back to what our previous speaker said. I wouldn't say that Boko Haram has been speaking to the communities and garnering support among the communities in any substantial way. I mean, 2.5 million people have been displaced from the areas. Boko Haram is not well loved. And in fact, the group that split off from Abu Bakr Shekau has said, we don't want to kill Muslims anymore, we don't want to target mosques, we don't want to target children, we don't want to use children as suicide bombers. We want to target Christians, and we want to target the mechanisms of the state. And there's perhaps a division in the tactics and the strategies of the groups, and to some extent the ideology that is now leading to a power struggle, with one group saying, look, if we want to survive, we're going to need to garner popular support. Right now, we are very much hated. I think a lot of these splits, there have always been divides within Boko Haram. I think this split is perhaps a sign of weakness. Both sides of that split are vying for allegiance with Islamic State. I think a further sign of weakness, Boko Haram turned to the Islamic State and pledged its allegiance when it was under great pressure. So there's a lot of signs of weakness and fracturing and a command structure that's disintegrating here. But I have to agree with the previous speaker that that same kind of fracturing and fluidity of alliances and rivalries can make it very possible that the group regenerates down the line. These groups have been resilient in the past, and very much you cannot just simply eliminate Boko Haram fighters through military means. You have to have a much broader, more comprehensive approach that wins over communities and makes them allies in the fight against violent extremism.
Okay, Julia Wono, how would you say then is the best strategy to make the most of these splits, almost to combat the group?
Well, the central states that are Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and Cameroon really need to adapt as fast as the organization is able to adapt its strategy, its communication, and its relationship with local populations. And to do that, there is indeed, I will take the example of Cameroon. Cameroon, where the leadership of the executive is being criticized for probably its inability to communicate precisely on what's happening in the northern front, in the front where Boko Haram is operating. The President Paul Biya is somewhat, accused of not taking the threat seriously enough. I mean, despite the fact that the government has put huge efforts, financial and human efforts to counter militarily the threat, it seems that it has not adapted in terms of communication on what's happening on the ground, and also in terms of the comprehensive methodology that should be adopted to fight these types of group, not only with the force, with the security response, but also with the human response. How are we going to rebuild the communities that have been destroyed in these regions? I remember recently the story of a man who was the last villager of his village being killed. It's a drama for these societies and for these communities. So what are the responses of the government, and also what are the results of the cooperation between Chad, Cameroon, and Niger and Nigeria in fighting these combatants, which are able to flow between these countries, which are in terms of borders, there is no really border control in these countries. So how are these countries able to adapt besides and beyond the military approach? That's a real challenge for the government of these regions. So really now the challenge is to adapt and adopt more human response.
Thank you for that, Julia. Jennifer Cook, just briefly, your thoughts on the best way to tackle Boko Haram at this stage?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you definitely need to keep the military pressure up and kind of undermine the brand of Boko Haram. But absolutely, you have to be working with communities to win them as allies. They can be your best informants, your best intelligence on the ground. You need to track the financial flows and what is sustaining Boko Haram and prevent those from regrouping. You have to be very careful of the fallout from Libya and the possibility that fighters come over the border should things change there. And finally, I just came back from Maiduguri looking at the plight of internally displaced in Maiduguri. You have to take care of that massive population of displaced people who are right now without jobs, without livelihoods, and many without food. There's a whole new generation coming up, and you have to make sure that they're able to rebuild as well. Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm afraid that is all we have time for. I would like to thank both my guests this evening, Julia Wono, head of the Internet Without Borders Africa Desk, and from Washington, Jennifer Cook, director of the Africa Programme for Strategic International Studies. And thanks to you at home for being with us for the France 24 debate. Do stay with us, lots more news coming up next.